My name is Ava, and I am 29 years old. 3 months ago, my grandmother said something at a family dinner that finally broke 18 years of silence wide open. She looked at me across the table, at my career, my apartment, my independence, the life I had built entirely on my own terms, and said 7 words that she had been saying in different ways my entire life. You've always been too much, Ava. Too much. I had been hearing those words since I was 11 years old. Too much emotion. Too many opinions. Too loud, too direct, too unwilling to sit quietly and accept the particular version of family life that my grandmother had constructed and maintained with the iron precision of someone who confused control with love. But this time was different. This time I didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't file it away with everything else. This time I set down my fork. And I said, I know. That's always been the problem, hasn't it? The table went completely silent. Let me tell you about my grandmother Dorothy. She was 74 years old, sharp-minded, impeccably dressed in the way of women who understand that appearance is authority. She had been the center of our family's universe for as long as anyone could remember, not through warmth, not through the kind of love that makes people want to gather, but through the specific gravity of a woman who had decided long ago that her way was the correct way and had spent 5 decades making everyone around her agree. She had favorites. This was not a secret. Nobody in our family pretended it was a secret. We simply didn't talk about it, which is a different thing entirely. My cousin Jessica was the favorite. Had been since birth, for reasons that were never fully articulated, but were clearly legible to everyone. Jessica was compliant, decorative, easy. She laughed at Dorothy's jokes. She asked Dorothy's advice. She called every Sunday and listened to 45-minute monologues about things she had already heard and responded with the patient attentiveness of someone who had learned early that this was the price of being loved. I had never been able to pay that price. Not because I was difficult, though Dorothy would have said I was, but because from a very young age I had understood, with the particular clarity of children who see things adults have stopped seeing, that what Dorothy offered as love was actually something else. It was a transaction. You gave her compliance, attention, the constant confirmation that she was the most important person in any room. In return, she gave you her approval conditional, revocable, always slightly out of reach so you would keep reaching. Jessica reached. I had stopped reaching at 11. That was the year Dorothy had looked at a drawing I made. I had been drawing since I could hold a pencil, filling notebooks with faces and buildings and the entire architecture of an inner world that existed on paper, and said, "It's a bit much, don't you think? All these dark colors." I had looked at my drawing. Blues and greens and the particular colors of something I had felt strongly and tried to put down honestly. I like dark colors, I had said. Dorothy had looked at me with the specific expression she reserved for things that failed to meet her standards, not cruel, somehow worse than cruel. Simply dismissive. You would, she had said. I had put my drawings away that day. Not because she had hurt my feelings, though she had, but because something had clarified for me in that moment. Something about who she was and what she wanted and the gap between those things and who I was and what I needed. I was 11. I understood, at 11, that my grandmother did not love me. She loved the version of me that did not exist, the quieter, more compliant, less colorful version that would have fit neatly into the family she had constructed. The actual me, with my dark colors and my too many opinions and my unwillingness to perform gratitude for things that weren't given freely, that version she simply didn't know what to do with. So she told me I was too much. And for 18 years I had nodded and smiled and filed it away. Until the dinner. Until the 7 words. Until I set down my fork and said, I know. That's always been the problem, hasn't it? And watched every person at that table finally, collectively, hold their breath. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. I know because I counted, not deliberately, just the automatic counting of someone whose nervous system has registered that something significant has happened and is processing it in real time. For seconds of complete stillness. my mother's hand frozen halfway to her wine glass. My father looking at his plate with the expression of a man who has been dreading this moment for years and is now watching it arrive and doesn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. My cousin Jessica, favorite Jessica, Sunday call Jessica, staring at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not the usual careful blankness she maintained at family dinners. Something raw. Something that looked, unexpectedly, like recognition. And Dorothy. Dorothy at the head of the table, always the head of the table, always the center, the gravitational point around which the entire family dinner arranged itself, looking at me with an expression I had also never seen from her before. Not dismissal. Something more uncertain than that. "I beg your pardon," she said. Her voice was steady. Of course it was steady. Dorothy's voice was always steady, had been steady through 5 decades of managing this family with the precision of someone who confused control with love. But underneath the steadiness, something I had not heard before. A crack. Small. Almost imperceptible. But there. "I said I know," I repeated. My voice was calm, calmer than I expected, the particular stillness of someone who has made a decision and is standing in it. Being too much has always been the problem. Too much emotion. Too many opinions. Too much color in my drawings. I paused. Too much of whatever version of me existed that wasn't the version you wanted. "Ava." My mother's voice. Warning and something else underneath, something that might have been the beginning of relief. "No," I said. Not to my mother. To the table. To 18 years of nodding and filing away. I've been too quiet about this for too long. Dorothy set down her fork. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said. "But this is not the place." "When is the place?" I said. "We've been having these dinners for my entire life. Every Christmas. Every Easter. Every birthday where everyone sits at this table and performs the family you've decided we should be." I looked at her directly. "When exactly is the place, Dorothy?" The use of her name rather than Grandma landed like something physical. She flinched. Actually flinched. I had never seen Dorothy flinch before. My father put his hand on my arm, not restraining, just present. The particular touch of a man who has spent decades managing the space between his mother and his daughter and is finally, perhaps, stepping aside. Jessica said something I did not expect. "She's right." Quietly. Almost to herself. But audible. Completely audible. Dorothy turned to look at her favorite grandchild. "Jessica." "She's right," Jessica said again. Louder this time. With the particular effort of someone who has been holding something for a very long time and has decided, in this moment, to put it down. "You do have favorites. You always have. And I've spent my whole life being yours and she stopped. Something moved across her face. "I don't actually know who I am outside of what you wanted me to be." The table was very quiet. My mother was crying silently. I could see it without looking directly at her. The way you see things in peripheral vision that are too large to look at straight on. My father had moved his hand from my arm to my mother's. Dorothy sat at the head of her table and looked at the family she had constructed for 5 decades and saw, perhaps for the first time, what it actually looked like from the inside. Not grateful. Not harmonious. Exhausted. All of us, in our different ways, exhausted. "I think," my father said carefully into the silence, and this was remarkable because my father almost never spoke at these dinners, had learned decades ago to occupy the peripheral space of a man who has married into a strong woman's family and has managed the tension by becoming as invisible as possible. "I think this is a conversation that needs to happen. Not at the dinner table. But it needs to happen." Dorothy looked at him. For a moment I thought she was going to deploy the voice, the full authority of it, the 5 decades of it, the tone that said this conversation is over because I have decided it is over. Instead, she looked at the table. At her hands. At the family dinner that had just, quietly and irreversibly, changed. "Fine," she said. One word. The word of a woman who has been shown something she cannot unsee and has not yet decided what to do with it. The dinner ended 20 minutes later. Quietly. with the slightly dazed quality of people who have been through something and are not yet sure what to call it. I drove home alone, sat in my apartment in the dinner party clothes I hadn't changed out of yet, and looked at the wall and felt, not triumph, not the clean satisfaction I had imagined, in occasional fantasies over the years, that speaking the truth would bring. Something more complicated. The grief of it. For the grandmother I had wanted and never had. For the 18 years of dark colors put away in drawers. For Jessica's face when she said, "I don't know who I am outside of what you wanted me to be," the face of someone arriving at a truth that costs something. And underneath the grief, quiet, steady, real relief. The particular relief of a woman who has finally stopped carrying something alone. Jessica called me the next morning. 9 a.m. I was still in bed, had slept badly, the way you sleep after something significant, waking every few hours with the dinner replaying in fragments. When her name appeared on my phone, I stared at it for a moment before answering. We had not been close. That was the honest truth of it. Jessica and I had existed in the same family our entire lives, had sat at the same tables, attended the same gatherings, smiled at each other across the same rooms, and had never actually known each other. Because knowing each other would have required one of us to acknowledge the dynamic between us, and acknowledging the dynamic would have required one of us to speak the truth, and speaking the truth had felt impossible for 18 years. Until last night. "Hi," she said when I answered. "Hi," I said. A pause. The pause of two people standing at the beginning of something new and not quite knowing how to start. "I've been thinking," she said. "Since last night. About what I said." "Me too," I said. "I meant it," she said. "I don't know who I am outside of what she wanted." "I've been thinking about that all night and she stopped. I'm 32 years old and I call her every Sunday and I listen to her for 45 minutes and I say the right things and another stop. When did I decide that was love? When did I decide that was worth having?" I sat up in bed. "I think you decided it when you were very young," I said carefully. "When you understood that it was the version of love available to you and you made yourself fit it." I paused. I did the same thing in reverse. I understood I couldn't fit it and I stopped trying. But stopping trying had its own costs. "What costs?" she said. 18 years of being the difficult one, I said. The too much one. The one who doesn't appreciate what she has. I looked at my window, morning light, ordinary, the city waking up outside. I always knew I was right about her. But being right didn't make the Sunday dinners easier. Didn't make Christmas easier. Didn't make watching you get the love I wanted feel better. Jessica was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know you watched that," she said quietly. "Every year," I said. "Ava, I'm sorry." "You don't have to be sorry," I said. "You didn't design the dynamic. Neither did I. We were children." "We're not children anymore," she said. "No," I said. "We're not." We talked for 2 hours. The real version, not the surface conversation of family gatherings, not the performance of cousins who get along fine. But the actual conversation of two people who had been on opposite sides of the same dynamic their entire lives and were finally standing in the same place looking at it together. She told me things I hadn't known. The pressure of being the favorite, not the privilege I had imagined, but the specific suffocation of someone whose identity has been constructed entirely by someone else's needs. The Sunday calls that she made not because she wanted to but because missing one meant 3 weeks of Dorothy's strategic silence. The relationships that had struggled because she had never learned to be loved without performing. The therapy she had been in for 2 years working through exactly the things she was describing to me now. I told her things I hadn't said to anyone. The drawings. The 11-year-old who had understood something and responded by closing a door. The years of being the family's cautionary tale, the difficult one, the one who caused tension, the one whose absence from certain gatherings was actually a relief to everyone because her presence required management. At the end of 2 hours, Jessica said, "I want to have a different relationship with you. If that's possible." "It's possible," I said. "I don't know how," she said. "Neither do I said. "But that's okay. We figure it out." My mother called on a Wednesday. I had been waiting for this call, had known it was coming, had prepared myself for the version of it that managed and softened and tried to put last night back in its box. Instead, she said, "I want to apologize." I sat down. "For what specifically?" I said. "For knowing," she said. "I always knew how she treated you. I saw the drawing thing when you were 11. I saw every Christmas, every dinner, every time she looked at you like you were a problem to be managed." Her voice was not steady the way Dorothy's was always steady. It was the unsteady voice of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and has decided to put it down regardless of the weight. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that you were strong enough to handle it, that making an issue of it would only make things harder. "It did make things harder," I said. "The not making an issue of it." "I know," she said. "I'm sorry, Mom." I stopped. "I'm not angry at you. Not anymore. But I need you to understand, choosing the easier path didn't protect me. It just meant I was handling it alone." "You shouldn't have been alone," she said. "No," I said. "I shouldn't have." We stayed on the phone for a long time. Not resolving everything. Some things don't resolve in a single phone call, don't resolve in a year. Take the slow, patient work of time and honesty and choosing differently every day. But actually talking. My mother and I, for perhaps the first time as two adults who were being honest with each other about something that had been true for a long time. That was enough. For that Wednesday, it was completely enough. My grandmother called me 3 weeks after the dinner. I had not reached out. I had decided, with Dr. Nadia, my therapist, whom I had been seeing for a year and who had heard the full Dorothy history in considerable detail, that reaching out was not mine to do. That what Dorothy did with what had happened at the dinner was Dorothy's responsibility. That I had said the true thing and the next move was hers. She called on a Sunday morning. Not the Sunday morning call she made to Jessica, a different call, placed with what I imagined was considerable effort for a woman who had spent 74 years being the one who was called rather than the one who called. "Ava," she said when I answered. "Dorothy," I said. A pause. The pause of a woman who has prepared something and is now in the actual moment of it and finding it harder than the preparation. "I want to speak with you," she said. "In person. If you're willing." I thought about it honestly. Dr. Nadia and I had discussed this possibility. She had not told me what to do, that wasn't her role, but she had asked me the question that mattered. What do you want from a relationship with your grandmother? Not what's right. Not what's fair. What do you actually want? I had thought about it for 3 weeks. What I wanted was not warmth. I had stopped expecting warmth from Dorothy long ago, and the expectation itself had been part of the problem, the perpetual disappointment of wanting something from someone who didn't have it to give. What I wanted was honesty, the acknowledgement of something true. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing." We met at a cafe, neutral territory, her suggestion, which I noted and appreciated. She arrived before me, which surprised me. Dorothy was always the one who arrived last, the one who made others wait. The small power of it so habitual, she probably didn't notice it anymore. She was waiting at a corner table, smaller than I remembered. The same as my mother had been smaller, the same as the people from our childhood always are when we encounter them as adults. Just human-sized. Just a woman in her 70s with her hands around a coffee cup and something in her expression that I had never seen there before. Uncertainty. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course," I said. I sat down. We looked at each other for a moment, this woman who had shaped so much of my understanding of myself and me, the granddaughter she had called too much for 18 years. "I've been thinking," she said. "Since the dinner." She looked at her coffee. "I've been thinking about what you said. And what Jessica said." She stopped. I didn't realize Jessica felt the way she does. I thought, another stop. I thought what I gave her was love. It was a version of love, I said. Just not the version she needed. Dorothy looked at me. "What version did you need?" she said. The question surprised me. Not because it was complicated, the answer was simple. But because Dorothy had never asked before. Had never, in 29 years, asked what I needed. Had simply assessed what I was and found it wanting. To be seen, I said. Not the version of me that fit what you wanted. The actual me. Dark colors and too many opinions and all of it. She was quiet for a long time. I didn't know how to do that, she said finally. I'm not sure I know how now. She looked at her hands. My mother didn't know how either. I learned love as something you earn. Something conditional. I thought that was just how it worked. I thought about chains. About patterns passed through generations without anyone meaning to pass them. About the woman sitting across from me who had damaged people she loved because she had been given damaged tools and had never examined them. I know, I said. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. The same words my mother had written in her letter in the other story. The same words that people say when they finally understand the size of what they've done. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not here to give or withhold forgiveness, I said. I'm here because you called. And because I want to tell you something. She looked at me. I stopped drawing when I was 11, I said. Because you said my colors were too dark. I stopped for 15 years. I paused. I started again 2 years ago. And it's the best thing in my life. She pressed her lips together. I'm glad, she said. Quietly. Without performance. I know, I said. We drank our coffee. We talked carefully, without resolution, without the false comfort of pretending that one conversation undoes decades. But honestly, for the first time in my memory, Dorothy and I talked honestly. It was not everything, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, I had learned, were where everything worth having started. 6 months after the dinner. My life looked different from the outside and felt different from the inside, which is the only combination that actually counts. I had started showing my drawings. Not in the careful, hesitant way of someone asking permission, in the direct way of someone who has decided that what they make is worth seeing and is done waiting for external confirmation of that fact. A small gallery 2 streets from my apartment. 8 pieces. A Thursday evening. The warm, particular atmosphere of a room where people are looking at things that were made from something real. Jessica came. She stood in front of the largest piece, dark blues and deep greens, and the colors I had put away at 11 and reclaimed at 27, and looked at it for a long time without speaking. This is what you were doing all along, she said finally. Yes, I said. And she called it too much. Yes. Jessica shook her head slowly. Not with anger, with the particular sadness of someone who has understood something belatedly and is sitting with the cost of the delay. It's extraordinary, she said. Simply. Thank you, I said. Without deflecting. Without minimizing. My mother was there. She stood in front of the drawing I had made the week after the dinner, abstract, layered, something that had arrived through my hands from somewhere below conscious decision. She looked at it for a long time. I should have protected this, she said quietly. When you were 11. Yes, I said. You should have. She nodded. Accepting it. Not defending. I'm protecting it now, she said. If that counts. It counts, I said. Dorothy did not come to the show. I had not invited her, not as punishment, but because some things need time and the gallery felt like mine in a way that wasn't ready to include her yet. Maybe next time. Maybe not. That was a decision I would make when it arrived. What she had done was send a card. Plain envelope. Handwritten address. Her particular slant. Inside, for words. I would like to see them. I put the card on my drafting table. I looked at it for a few days. Then I called her. Next month, I said. I'll bring some pieces to show you. A pause. The pause of a woman receiving something she understands she has not earned. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, I said. Just look at them honestly. I will, she said. I want to tell you something. The people who tell you that you are too much are telling you something about themselves, not about you. They are telling you that your full self, your colors, your opinions, your unwillingness to perform a smaller version of yourself for their comfort exceeds their capacity. That their love has a ceiling and you keep hitting it. That is not your problem to solve. You were not put here to fit inside someone else's ceiling. You were put here to be exactly as much as you are. All of it. The dark colors. The too many opinions. The drawings that someone once called excessive and you put away and reclaimed and hung on walls where people stood and looked at them and called them extraordinary. Find the people whose love has no ceiling. Build your life with them. And when someone tells you that you are too much, set down your fork. Look them in the eye. And say, I know. That's always been the problem, hasn't it? Because the problem was never you. The problem was the ceiling. And you were always meant to live without one. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Has anyone ever told you that you were too much? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me where you are watching from. I love knowing how far these stories reach. Until next time, keep all your colors. Every single one.